Hello and welcome to my channel Keen Reads. My name is Jared and today I am doing a list video of my bucket list books or bucket list classics. This is an idea I got from a video that I watched by Venetia Marie. I believe that is her channel. She did this a while ago, but I just watched it and I thought it was a cool idea. So I went through my list. I've alluded to this list before, but it's kind of my list, my TBR list, and it's almost 600 books long, I think. So I picked 10 books off of there that, if I were to prioritize them, those are the 10 that stood out to me that I really want to make sure that I read before I kick the bucket. And to note, I did sort the list based on books that I own. So we're only looking at books that I own that I haven't read that I definitely want to read before I kick the bucket. I did take some notes for this video, just because these books are books that I have not read. So I don't know a ton about them, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background. Nothing very in-depth or anything, just highlights from what I got from Wikipedia, really. But the first one, and most of these books are books you're going to know, so I'm not going to share any hidden secrets or anything like that. The first book that I have is James Joyce's Ulysses. Again, a book that all of you should know if you watch my channel. Originally published in 1922. I just recently got this edition. But originally published in 1922. I believe it was first published in the US in 1934 or 1936. The delay was due to, it was actually in an obscenity trial. So it was seen as obscene and was not allowed to be published in the US. I'm sure you guys all know about Ulysses, but it is the story of three, I almost said Italians, three Irish men and women. And it's a retelling of Homer's The Odyssey. So kind of fitting timing with Nolan's Odyssey just coming out. I do think I'll read this one pretty soon, actually. I was thinking of reading it next month, but we'll see. I'm planning a TBR video coming up soon, so expect to see this in there. But it's the story of three Irishmen and women. Molly Bloom, who I believe correlates to Penelope in the Odyssey, so Odysseus or Ulysses' wife. Leopold Bloom, who corresponds to Odysseus or Ulysses. And then Stephen Daedalus, who corresponds to Telemachus, who is their son. He is, to my understanding, I don't think Stephen Daedalus is their son in this novel. I could be wrong. I think he more so relates to Telemachus in other aspects of his life. But it follows these three characters. It takes place on one day, June 16th, 1904. I know that because June 16th is my birthday, not 1904 though. And I've always kind of felt drawn to this book, but very intimidated by it. But I feel like I've done enough background reading and I've done enough reading of Joyce himself and foundational works to be ready to take this on. Yeah, so this is James Joyce's Ulysses, book I want to read before I kick the bucket. Next, I have another very well-known book that's talked about on BookTube a lot, and that is In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. So this is a 7-volume series, of which I've actually read half of it. Well, I've read 6 of 7 volumes. So volume 1 is Swan's Way, which I have read. Volume 2 is Within a Budding Grove, which I have also read. And then I've also read volume 3, which is The Guermantes Way. I have not read volume 4 and 5, volume 4, Sodom and Gomorrah, and then volume 5 and 6, which is The Captive and the Fugitive. This volume, or this edition, actually combines them into one, so it's 6 volumes. But sometimes these are volumes 5 and 6 in some editions. And then this is volume 6 in this edition, or volume 7 in other editions, which is Time Regained, the final volume. So originally published from 1914 to 1928, it is translated into English by Scott Moncrief, which I hear is the kind of the landmark translation. It's the translation that you have to get. I have the it's C.K. Scott Moncrief translation, and it says Terence Kilmartin, revised by D.J. Enright. I'm not really sure how this differs from the original Scott Moncrief or C.K. Scott Moncrief translation. So if anyone knows, let me know. I'm sure they probably talked about it in the introduction to the first volume, but I read that several years ago, so I don't remember. Also, let me know if you guys have experience reading these volumes years apart, because I probably read the first 3 volumes maybe 5+ years ago now. And I'm kind of wondering if I should just reread the whole thing. I definitely like them enough to reread them, but that's just such a long time commitment that I'm not really sure at this point. Summary of this, it follows a stand-in for the author and really is just kind of a muse and ramblings on his life, not necessarily autobiographical, but on the life of the stand-in for the author, and plays a lot around with memory, specifically involuntary memory. So the idea that whether we like it or not, some things bring back memories. The most famous example is the Madeleine, the cookie that brings him back to, I believe it was his grandmother's house, or just a time in his childhood when he tastes the cookie. So we all have those, whether it's cookies in the oven or the smell inside of a car or something like that. So kind of playing around with the idea of involuntary memory. Next we have the Life and sorry, I have the Modern Library Edition. Next we have The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman by Laurence Sterne. This was published in 1767. I actually have to look my notes. 1759 to 1767. It was serialized. And this is a mock biography of the title character, Tristram Shandy. All I know about it is that it is almost postmodern in its writing style. I believe it uses stream of consciousness. It was held in high regard. Sorry, I just bumped the camera. It was held in high regard by the modernists, so Joyce, Virginia Woolf, postmodernists as well. It kind of had a mixed reception up until that time, but I'm pretty sure it's always been, at least in some point, regarded as a classic. The other thing I know about it is that it is kind of obscene, so there's kind of a theme in these books. It's obscene, kind of satirical, and it starts with the title character's conception, not his birth, and it takes quite a while, I think multiple volumes or chapters, before we actually even get to the character's birth. So that is The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman. Next, we have The Essays of Montaigne, Miguel de Montaigne. I believe that is how you pronounce his name. I have the Everyman's Library edition of his complete works, actually. It's a huge book. I believe it's 1,400 pages. In addition to his essays, here you can see what it looks like without the dust jacket. I got this from my parents for Christmas this year, so thank you to my parents. But this includes, I believe, his travel journals as well as some letters in addition to the essays. Travel journal and then letters. So it's about 1,400 pages, and the essays take up the first 990, and then there's about 500 pages of journals and letters, it looks like. But I'm sure most of you have heard of the letters of Miguel de Montaigne. They are his musings on human nature and the result of his own introspection. And it kind of, I believe he was probably the first real essayist, which essays are something that have always interested me. I have a copy of T.S. Eliot's essays, Virginia Woolf's complete essays. I just find the essay a fascinating format, and this is kind of where it all got started. Another interesting thing for me is that I believe he was a big influence on Shakespeare. So that is this is the complete works by Montaigne, but really the essays are the bread and butter of what I want to read. Next, we have probably the least known work, I would say, work on this list, and that is Arcadia, or The Countess of Pembroke. Arcadia by Sir Philip Sidney. The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia is what it's technically called, by Sir Philip Sidney. This was published in 1593. There were 2 editions of this book, called the Old Arcadia, and then a revised edition called the New Arcadia. I don't know which edition this is. This is just one I got off line, or I might have bought this at a bookstore. Can't remember. Old Penguin edition. But this is a pastoral romance. So a romance taking place in like a rustic area. I'm pretty sure is the definition of a pastoral romance. Again, very influential book. It may have had influences on King Lear, Hamlet, The Winter's Tale, Milton. Also, something I got from the Wikipedia page, which I did not know of, is the earliest known use of the name Pamela is from this novel. So another book that I want to read before I kick the bucket is Arcadia by Sir Philip Sidney. This is not the only Philip Sidney that I own. I also have his In Defense of Poesy, or his Defense of Poetry, essentially. Next, we have a book that I have shared on this channel before, and this is my edition of Plutarch's Lives. So I have this 2-volume edition. This is volume 1. So The Lives of the Noble Grecians and Romans by Plutarch, in the superb and rare translation by Sir Thomas North. So, this, to my knowledge, is the earliest translation into English of this work. I believe that Thomas North translated Amyot. Let me look at my notes again. Amyot, A-M-Y-O-T. So, Thomas North's translation is from 1579, and he translated it based upon a French translation done by Amyot from, I believe, the original Greek or either the Latin. So it's translated from Greek to Latin. I am not sure if Amyot's French translation was from the Greek or the Latin. And then this edition is based upon that French. So the French is from 1559. This is from 1579. So very old translation, but it's one of the only complete Plutarchs that I was able to find. There are other more recent translations, but it's hard to find them incomplete, which have both the Greek lives and the Roman lives and the essays to them all paired up. So the idea of this is Plutarch, who is writing in the 2nd century AD, again in Greek, was writing about Greek lives and comparing them to Roman lives. I believe one of the comparisons he uses is Alexander to Julius Caesar. I could be mixing that up, so don't quote me on that. But that's the idea of what he's doing. And then he writes an essay upon those that comparison. Similar theme here, another influence of Shakespeare. Maybe not so much an influence as a source for Shakespeare. So, for example, I know that he relied heavily on this text for... Look at this beautiful title page. I mean, I guess it's just this, but still. I know he relied on this for like the lives of Antony and Cleopatra, Antony for his play Antony and Cleopatra, for his play on Julius Caesar, and just looking through some of these, there's the life of Theseus, the life of Romulus, and then the comparison of Theseus to Romulus, which is the essay. I think there's 23 comparisons total. But yes, Alexander is compared to Julius Caesar, and then there's a comparison essay of the two. I want to say there's 23 comparisons, so 46 essays. Well, 46 biographies, I would say, and then an essay, and then probably 23 essays on each pair. But I could be incorrect. That's just off the top of my head. But this is Sir Thomas North's translation of Plutarch's Lives. Next, we have the most modern book, and these are in no particular order. They're just the order I've thought of them. Next, we have the most modern book on this list, which is Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. Probably the most famous Pynchon. Again, not much I have to say about this, I don't think. Notoriously difficult book, published in 1973. Yes, published in 1973, set in World War II, has to do with finding some missiles, I believe, or tracking down the location of missiles or something along those lines. But notoriously difficult, notoriously like the kind of the postmodern novel. I have this really cool Penguin Deluxe edition that I got for pretty cheap. So I was kind of lucky to find this. Again, French flaps, deckled edges, which I like, even though I think deckled edges are kind of controversial, at least on BookTube from what I can see. Not going to talk too much about this just because I feel like we all know about Gravity's Rainbow. I've read a decent bit of Pynchon. I've read Bleeding Edge. I've read Inherent Vice, which are kind of pinch on light, is what I hear. I haven't read Shadow Ticket. Haven't read Against the Day. Haven't read Vineland. I've read Mason and Dixon, and then I have read The Crying of Lot 49. So I read 4 pinch on. I don't know if this will be my next. I kind of want to read V first, which I believe is his first novel, and then go to this one. But if I were to die next week and I knew it, this is the one that I would read if I had to read one pinch on novel. Kind of a morbid thought. Next we have A Tale of Two Cities. And really this is more of a stand-in for Charles Dickens in general. So this is just probably the Dickens that I own that I most want to read, but I really want to read more Dickens in general. I've only read Great Expectations, and then I've read A Christmas Carol. This specific one was published in 1859. But really, Dickens just represents a great whole in my literary knowledge, or my reading history, I would say. He's probably him and maybe Anthony Trollope are like the major 18th century novelists that I have not read. Not 18th century, 1800s novelists that I have not read. And this is probably the most famous work by Dickens that I have. And again, haven't read it. I also have Little Dorrit, and I believe Hard Times. I actually don't have Great Expectations or A Christmas Carol, although those are the 2 that I have read. But for those of you that don't know, which everyone here probably knows Charles Dickens, he was a 19th century Victorian novelist, probably the most famous one. I talked about him in my most recent video because he was friends with Wilkie Collins. Next we have The Comedies by Aristophanes. So Aristophanes was alive from like 440 to 360, something like that, BC. He was a Greek playwright, and he's the first comedy playwright. I don't know if comedian is the right word. I mean, I guess if you write tragedies, you're a tragedian. So I guess he's the first comedian. I don't know. But this is his complete works, actually, or at least his complete plays. I believe only 12 or so are available in full, just because of what's recoverable today. But again, I've never read any Greek comedy. I've read the 3 major tragedians. I've read Sophocles, I've read Aeschylus, or Aeschylus, I don't know how you say it, and then Euripides as well. But never read any Aristophanes. So that's kind of a foundational work of a drama that I have not read. So Aristophanes. And then the last book. This is kind of a wild card. Not super famous, but it's one that I've had my eye on for a while, and that is Gargantua and Pantagruel by Francois Rabelais. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. This is just a beat-up Penguin edition, but sometimes those are the best editions. Published in 1532 to 1564. This is a pentology of novels. It looks like there's some kind of annoying, because I hate this. The corners in here are bent, which is annoying, but that's okay, because I think I paid $1 for this, so I'm not going to complain too much. But this is a pentology of novels, so 5 novels dealing with 2 giants, Gargantua and then his son, Pantagruel. And I don't know much about this, honestly. I've just heard it's kind of absurd. It was almost obscene. Again, I feel like I'm using that word a lot in this video. And satirical work. Similar to Shakespeare, I believe Rabelais introduced a lot of new words into the French vocabulary. So this was written in French. This translation is by M.A. Screech. That I have and that I will be reading whenever I read this. But again, don't know a lot about this. I know it's kind of irreverent and just seems like a really interesting read. So this was kind of a 10th pick that I just kind of threw on because nothing else was really standing out to me. But yeah, there's the 10th. Now that I think about it, I did not share the translator of my Montaigne. So let me pull that back up just to do justice. This is translated by Donald M. Frame. So, thank you for watching. If anyone has any thoughts or has read any of these books and has suggestions for how to read them, what to read first, preferred translations, I would greatly appreciate that. And let me know what's on your bucket list of reads as well. What are those books that, before you kick the bucket, you really want to make sure that you click them off? That's all I got. Thanks for watching. See you next time.